Welcome back. You're watching Newscentre. The G20 summit will also focus on ways to bridge the wide gender disparity. A latest report by Moody's Analytics highlights limited and divergent progress made in elevating females in the workplace. The report says gender gap gets wider in senior positions, with only 23% of executive roles held by women. Sectors expected to drive future productivity, including information and technology, have a much lower share of female leaders. The report suggests policies like flexible working conditions, providing affordable childcare, providing paid maternity and paternity leave will help to drive the change in the right direction. Bridging the gender gap could boost the global GDP by $7 trillion. To take this forward, I'm now joined by co-author of this report, Dawn Holland, who is the Director of Economic Research at Moody's Analytics. Dawn, thank you very much for being with us. Give me a sense of the reasons for this gender gap that we see in management positions.
So the reasons behind the gender gap are numerous, and it's not something that's evolved over a short period of time. It has sort of strong social norms underpinning it, which means it's a very difficult and complex thing to shift. But some of the policies that some countries have put in place that we've seen have helped to narrow that gap has been things that help in the workplace. So, for example, allowing greater flexibility in the workplace, allowing both paid maternity and paternity, very importantly, leave, and providing more affordable childcare.
Right. Dawn, one observation that your report had made, that women make a higher upfront investment in education, but actually land up in lower level and lower paid positions. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. Exactly. So what we looked at, we looked at the imbalance, the gender imbalance in the share of women who hold middle and senior management positions. And we first looked to see, well, is that explained by differences in labor force participation? And in some countries that goes some way to explaining the gap, but certainly not fully. And most countries only explains about a quarter of the gap. So then we decided to look at skills mismatch. Do women lack the skills to hold these positions? And that was flat out no. In fact, across the broad spectrum of countries that we looked at, there are more women who hold higher level degrees, such as master's degrees, across the OECD than there are men. So there are plenty of women who are, have the skills and educational background and are ready to step into those positions. But there are other factors, for example, a lack of flexibility in the workforce, which is holding them back from taking those roles.
Right. Dawn, also give us a sense, you have also told us that if we allow women to reach their full potential, where can the global economy go as a result of that? But if I were to ask you, how is India's economic potential suffering as a result of gender disparity? Would you be able to quantify that?
Well, that's a very good question. And I guess the way I would look at it is to say that closing the gender gaps in India have the potential to deliver some very high economic returns indeed. And I would mention two key points. So first is that the gender gaps in India are particularly wide. There are about less than 30% of working age women are currently attached to the workforce. And if you look at the share of managerial positions held by women, that share shrinks to about 15–16%. So if we were to close those gaps, that would bring a lot more people into the workforce. So already we have potential to grow faster because we have more people actively participating in the workforce. And if we were to elevate more women to higher skilled, higher return managerial positions, that could also bring returns in terms of raising the average productivity level of the economy. So India has this brilliant, vibrant, very large and young workforce, and there are more and more women who are actively seeking higher levels of education and are ready to jump into those positions. So I think there's really a lot of potential for India to unlock a stronger growth through addressing gender imbalances.
My final question, would you be able to tell us about the percentage of women present at board levels in boardrooms across companies in the world, and how do we make sure that more women rise to those positions?
So this is a work that was done by some of my colleagues rather than my own work. But I can just comment very briefly on that. And what they found was that there is a positive relationship between an increase in the number of women on boards, or the share of board places held by women, and the returns of individual companies. So without suggesting necessarily a direction of causality, they identified that having more women was associated with more higher levels of return across a large number of companies.
All right, Dawn Holland, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this will be a big discussion point at G20 meetings here in Delhi and also through the year during India's presidency. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Newscentre. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.